So welcome everyone. This is the Quant University Autumn School Kickoff. Thank you so much for joining in today. It's October the 27th. It's a nice fall day here in the New England area. I'm based out of Boston, which I was just talking to Gautier. So he's enjoying some really good weather in Hong Kong, and we are also seeing some nice fall colors here in Boston. And today we are kicking off the autumn school. So for people who are joining us again from the summer school, welcome back. For people who are new and joining us for the first time, so we are Quant University. We are a Boston-based company, and we focus on the intersection of data science, machine learning, and quantitative finance. And we have been doing a lot of boot camps and educational workshops, and also a lot of thought leadership work, a lot of companies on various areas. And one of the favorite topics for me is machine learning, and I'm always intrigued and very enthusiastic to learn about new developments and also how these have been applied in quantitative finance. And I found out about Dr. Gautier Marty's amazing work on synthetic data generation and application of GANs. And I had a chance to chat with him during the summer timeframe, and I wanted to see if we could have him present. And he was, having a very busy schedule at that point. But fortunately, he has made time to come down to the Boston virtually, and he's presenting his work on applications of synthetic data generation using GANs. So before we go ahead, I'm going to make a quick a couple remarks to just introduce you formally to our platform and also to a little bit of where to find the slides. So all the slides and the videos associated with today's presentation will be available on q.academy. So if you just go to qu.academy, and then you'll have to register. And then once you register, you just use your login credentials. And if you see there are multiple educational materials available, and if you go to the Q lecture series, you will be able to get all the summer school related lectures, which we have recorded. We had 10 amazing lectures, and also the fall school related materials. So please feel free to log in and find out about the various talks. Give me 1 second. And I will just present a couple of slides before handing over the stage to Gautier. As I mentioned, we are based out of Boston, and we have been doing a lot of educational work in the various areas of data science, machine learning, and finance. And the fall school, we are going to be having 8 lectures. It's going to be on a weekly cadence, either Tuesday or Wednesday around the noon time frame. We'll have either a 1 to 1.5 hour lecture, and all these lectures are complimentary, and you'll be able to find out all the upcoming lectures at qfallschool.splashnet.com. Next week we have Sarah Biller and Dushyant Sharawat. Sarah is the founder of FinTech Sandbox, and Dushyant is at Rosenblatt Securities. They've been doing some amazing work on FinTech. So we're going to be talking about what FinTech looks like post-COVID. It's going to be a fascinating discussion, so please don't miss out on that. And then also we are launching the FinTech Bootcamp this time around, so please take a look at it if that's of interest. And today we are going to spend the next hour and a half or so talking about GANs and synthetic data generation. It's a masterclass format. Gautier has put in a lot of time, and he has put in more than 50, 60 slides of material. So I'm also going to be taking my notepad and pen and making notes along the way. And hopefully we'll all learn a lot of new things in here. So the way we have structured this masterclass, Gautier will go through an introduction to GANs, or generative adversarial networks. So for people who are new to neural networks, there's been some fascinating innovations which have happened in the last 4 to 5 years with deep learning and various kinds of architectures which have evolved. And GANs have been very promising for synthetic data generation. And I've been tracking a lot of different efforts. There is the SDGIM and associated projects happening here at MIT. And then in the summer school, we had Dr. Julia Fanti from Carnegie Mellon University, who presented on doppelgangers. again, an architecture using GANs. And there are also been multiple research efforts on using GANs for synthetic data generation. So it's a fascinating field, and Gautier will be presenting his work on core GANs. And there's also an archive paper, which is very fascinating. I would highly recommend you to read this paper. For people who don't know Gautier, so Gautier got his PhD from École Polytechnique. Yeah, he's a renowned French quant, and I would love to hear some time on how he made his journey to Hong Kong, of all places, leaving the fun and beautiful city of Paris. He has also worked at various data-savvy buy-side firms like Helbor Capital, AXA, and Juris, and Shell Street. And he also runs an amazing machine learning meetup group in Hong Kong. And I'm always fascinated on how he makes time to get all these ideas and all the people together and run this meetup group. But the other thing I would highlight is his blog, which is very meticulously put together. And I love when he goes to ICML and other conferences and takes all the learnings and documents it and makes it available in a consumable form to various quants. So thank you for all your work, for both what you're doing, Gautier, and also to the community. I will hand over the stage to Gautier. So Gautier, I will make you the presenter and you can share your screen.
All right, perfect. So thank you, Sri, for the very kind introduction. Let me try to share my screen now. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see
it properly. Okay. So thanks everyone for attending this this first session of the Autumn School. In the next hour or so, I will try talk to you about deep generative models, GANs, and others, but I will try to make it quite pedagogical. So we will start from the basic and build up toward application to finance. So even if you don't know about neural networks, I hope that you will be able to get something from this presentation. And yes, that's pretty much it. If you know all that stuff already, I hope at least it will be entertaining. So how the presentation is structured. First, we'll talk about these models, introduce them, talk about the milestone in their development over the previous couple of years, the major achievements, and then we will try to look together for the people that do not know how it works, to look behind the black box, to try to understand how they are working. It's quite an amazing technology. And then I would say maybe the meat of the presentation, we'll look at a couple of ideas. The execution is at different stage of maturity, but a couple of ideas how to apply this model for, in this talk, quant applications, but they can be useful also for data vendors and other players in finance. And then we will a bit say where the state of the art is and the limitation that have to be overcome so that they become mature technology ready for everyone. So let's start with maybe a definition. So generative models, these models that can generate data, it's a very broad class of model. Even using neural networks, there are different kinds. There are shallow models like restricted Boltzmann machine, autoencoders, and deeper ones like the generative adversarial networks and adversarial autoencoders. For the sake of clarity, we'll just focus with one model, which maybe is also the most promising and that has the best success so far in the computer vision literature. So we'll talk about GANs, so generative adversarial network. What are they? So let me read the definition. A generative adversarial network, GAN, is a class of machine learning frameworks where two neural networks, usually known as the generator and the other one, the discriminator, contest with each other in a zero-sum game. That is, one agent's gain is another agent's loss. All right, so at this point, if it's still fuzzy for you, it's totally normal. It's not very informative and maybe lots of words are not properly defined. But what is maybe more easy to understand is their purpose. generating realistic synthetic data. So given a training set, this technique learns to generate new data with the same statistics as the training set. Okay, so imagine you have a black box, you push a button, magic button on this black box, and it outputs a sample that's supposed to be realistic. So now I'm gonna take like a 3-minute break. I will show you this video that I realized in the context of the machine learning meetups I run. And basically consider that as an executive summary. So it's a very high level, doesn't go into the details, for lots of ideas without much argumentation. If you are busy, then you get the main flow of the presentation and other ideas. And it will also help by repetition to understand what comes next. So let's look this 2-minute 50 videos. I hope that the sound is good, otherwise it's available on YouTube, and maybe Sri has pointed it in the page on his website.
Data is a core but highly sensitive and proprietary asset in finance. Here are 6 examples. Banks have confidential data on their customers.
Lights are not moving. The video is not presented. So
sorry, Sri?
the video is not coming. We can only
it's
hear.
Not coming.
Yeah.
Okay, let me. Maybe I need to change the screen sharing.
You have a dual monitor.
Okay, let me. Probably it's not sharing the correct screen. New share. Okay. I think it should work now. Okay. Is it working now?
Still not.
And now?
Yeah, it is working now. Thank you.
Okay, so sorry for that. Thanks for helping me on that. So let's maybe restart at this point.
Data is a core but highly sensitive and proprietary asset in finance. Here are 6 examples. Banks have confidential data on their customers, but also on public and private companies. Their trading desks generate valuable data on market activity. Data vendors and hedge funds chase expensive alternative data, while auditors and regulators work with material non-public information. How can the different players in finance share and sell data to each other without breaching any Chinese law, regulations, or privacy laws, or without harming their competitive edge? Moreover, original data has a lot of shortcomings in practice. Lack of historical data, missing fields, imbalanced classes, overfitted strategies on a given data set. Fortunately, novel advances in deep learning can provide a solution. Classical machine learning can be subdivided into unsupervised, supervised, and reinforcement learning. More recent categories include representation and adversarial learning. Let's consider the example of a money counterfeiter to understand adversarial learning. The counterfeiter's goal is to fool the public and the police, while the police's goal is to find fake bills and arrest them. Doing so, the counterfeiter learns to make more realistic bills, and the police gets more accurate at detecting fake ones. GANs have produced amazing results. Can you guess which one of these 3 persons is not real? Actually, none of them are. They were all generated via GANs. Researchers have shown that it is possible to generate realistic synthetic data for detecting fraudulent transfers and anomalies in accounting statements, sharing anonymized credit card transactions, and testing the robustness of strategies. GAN technology can enable efficiency gains, increased sales, a broader adoption of machine learning in the cloud, and the creation of a market for trained models. For more information on this amazing new technology, please contact us.
All right, that's it for the, let's say, the high-level executive summary. So now let's go back, if I manage to do it, to the slides. Is that okay for everyone now?
Yes, we can see your slides.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's get into it. So basically, we will go this time a bit deeper than this high-level view of what GANs can do. So to understand what they are able, we'll review their success so far, mostly image generation. And you have to understand that this will be a bit a higher bound of what can be achieved in finance. For many reasons, is that this field is quite active in academia and industry. This field is quite open for these researchers. So they build on each other's work, it progresses quite fast. And also the signal, the ratio of the signal to noise is much more favorable in this computer vision domain. So that's why they, I mean, all the improvement comes from this field. In finance, you know, it's not necessarily about, everyone is a bit reinventing the wheel in his corner. It's not about doing the perfect wheel, but more like a wheel that is less square than the neighbor. So that's why that's probably most breakthrough comes from this computer vision area, but we'll get inspiration from them. And then we'll go through the working and a few business case for quants. There are also, as you see in the video, as you saw, more business and use case in finance, but we'll focus on those that are concerned to quants. So GANs, when did it all started? So in late 2014, there was this paper at this conference, NeurIPS, which is one of the top two with ICML. And this paper proposed the methods. So for now, let's consider a black box, which has a magic button. You push a button, it creates a sample that is realistic. So if you look, for example, at the digits, in the square box, you have like original digits from a training set, a typical machine learning test bed, benchmark training set. And if you do it well, if you manage to train your model sufficiently well, each time you push the button, you have a random digit that appear. But what's nice is that it looks like a real digit. So you can generate this fake digit image, which looks like real. You can do also on faces, and you can do that on picture of horses, owls, etc. You can see that results are not that amazing, but once again, it was the first paper. It was more proof of concept, showing that it's an amazing idea that may work, but needs more work. And since then, as you can see by the number of citations, like more than 22,000 as of last month, many researchers and build on these ideas and worked and improved it. And we'll see that in the next couple of slides. So on this one, first we can see that, of course, the quality of the image generated 2 years after have improved a lot. But there is also a new idea that has appeared, is that we can condition this model. So what does it mean so far? We have this black box, we have this magic button, we push it, produce a random image, let's say, a random sample. But now we can also add a wire to this black box. And in this wire, we can pass in some signal, some information. So in this context, what it is, it's this text. So for example, we can say this bird is white with some black on its head and wings and has a long orange beak. So now, given this text, pushing the button on the black box will produce birds that fits this description. So of course, there are still an infinity of possible birds that fit this description, but it will be conditioned on this text. And that's it. So you see in 2 years, there were improvements on the quality. and also improvement on the use. We can add some side information. 1 year later, the deepfakes. So this is quite topical at the time because there was a recent scandal with news from a Russian bot, and also because people became aware of this technology with the Obama video. So I put the link there, you can watch it. So we are not here to do politics, but it's quite funny and topical. So basically the message is, using this model, anyone can impersonate pretty much anyone. So an actor can take a comedian can impersonate Barack Obama and make him say the things he would never say. Or for example, less political, you can have Jack Nicholson in The Shining. You condition of him being Jim Carrey, and you have this translation from this Jack Nicholson in The Shining to Jim Carrey in The Shining. And what is very nice is that, for example, an angry Jack Nicholson have not the same facial expression and acting as Jim Carrey, but this is translated nice. So it's progress is very amazing, but you can start to feel also that there can be also ethical concern and another problem that may arise with it. Another progress here, I would say it's not so much for the technological aspect, but more for the marketing, branding, and the question it raises about what is art, what does the art market pay for as a premium. You have like a couple of French students, not even AI experts, that use a tool produced by another people, so mathematician, artist, generated this figure and managed to sell it at an auction at Christie's for more than 400K. So this raised quite many like philosophical questions. What is art? Who is the real author of this painting? Why pricing so much? Because it could be like generated ad infinity. So interesting questions that are raised by this AI technology. And 1 year later, another progress, another benchmark. NVIDIA, the chip maker, they have also this research in AI and image generation, and they managed to produce models that produce very, very realistic picture of faces, so realistic that it fools human. And actually, for example, in December 19, Facebook said that they took down a network of accounts with false identities. And actually, many of the profile pictures of these fake accounts were generated by AI. So once again, you have to understand it's nothing that couldn't be done before. We could before also fake videos, we could fake image, could fake account, but this was like quite tedious. You had to hire expert to do what, or it was time consuming. So if you were to scam people, you had to choose well the target, etc. This thing, it just lowers the price point of doing massive scamming. So for frauds, if you are equipped with this technology, which is quite accessible, you can target millions of people for very cheap, and there will be a few fish statistically that will fall in the trap. So yeah, it can be quite spooky. But yes, so far we talk only about images. What about the other domains? Because this technology could help in other domains. So after images, usually for this machine learning community, next signal that is also quite nice to work with, and you can have plenty of data, is sound. So what they have done is using sound to do some tasks. And in this case, you have your black box. The goal is still to generate faces, for example, but you will put into the wire with the side information the recorded sound of one person speaking. So what is amazing, of course you can tell, but now a machine can do it and at scale, is that given how you speak, you can have a good approximation of the gender, the the approximate age, and also the ethnicity. So this also, it can raise like ethical concern because in some countries, so it's not true in any countries, but some countries you are not supposed for official documents, insurance, administrative process to know or ask about the ethnicity of a person. You are from this nationality and that's it. So for example, here you could de-anonymize partly a person using this technology. And that's something to be aware of. And then the last thing that I would like to mention is this kind of story of the evolution of this model and what they have achieved over the past 6 years or so, is this game GAN. So what is that? It's quite hard to explain, but essentially by observing videos of a game being played, the GAN is able to generate a wall, is able to generate the game. So it's able to learn the physics. The Pac-Man cannot cross through a wall. It can memorize the background. So from a frame to a frame far distant in the future, the walls, the background shouldn't change. Also the logic of the game, if the Pac-Man eats candies, they can't respawn randomly, etc. And all the interaction. So this is very early, at an early stage, but it has amazing applications. For example, instead of coding a program to a specialized architecture and then recoding it in many languages for many platforms, you could do it once, make a GAN learn it, and that's your emulator. You don't need to do this programming. So this, I would say, is the most amazing achievement of this model, and I would say the state of the art. So this was published by NVIDIA again in May 2020, so very recent. So, okay. That was for the nice story and what has been done with these models. Now, how do they work? So far, I've told it's a black box. You push a button, you put some inside information, but let's go a bit deeper into how it works. So essentially, for this model, you need a data set. So in the past example, it was essentially like it was like images, but let's say that for financial application, it can be correlation matrices or time series. You have the two networks, the two neural networks, so the neural network G that will create, it's the black box that will create the samples, and the discriminator, which, if you remember the small video at the introduction, is the police officer that tries to detect if it's false or not. And the magic black button of the black box is actually a random number generator, which is pretty standard and available in any decent programming languages. So that's for all the components. Now, these components, these neural networks, you have to train them. So at the start, they are randomly initialized, and then you have an algorithm to progressively update it and make them work as you intend to. So the algorithm is relatively simple. It's essentially a for loop. So you loop, you iterate, you start from nothing, and then at each loop, you improve a bit. And this loop has two main components. So the first component here in red that we explain is the training, the fitting of the discriminator network. And after, the second part will be the fitting of the generator network. We'll go through a full first execution of the main loop, and we'll stop there. But if you understand at this point, then it's pretty straightforward. You just repeat lots of time and you have your model trained. So let's do it step by step together. You have your training data set. Okay, images, let's say 2 by 2 images, 4 pixels. You have this magic button, random generator. Basically here, it can be -2 and 3. Then these two numbers randomly generated, -2 and 3, let's say, you put it through a neural network G, which is the generator. So for people that are not familiar with neural network, actually it's quite simple, their way of functioning. these two numbers, -2 and 3, you will pass this information to the next layer. So what does it mean to pass information to the next layer? Well, you do that by simple arithmetic operation, let's say. This node, at this position, it will take a new value, which is coefficient or weight, as they call it, 1 times the value 1, so time -2, plus another weight times the other value 3. Here again, and one weight times -2 plus another weight times 3, you get a value, and this value you will pass it to a nonlinear monotonic operation, function that will give another value, and up you have new values on this layer. You do that once again, and at the last layer you obtain 4 values. Okay, then these 4 values you just rearrange them, and ta-da, you have 2 by 2 synthetic image. So here at this point, there is no reason that it looks like anything real, realistic or whatever. It's quite random because we start from random noise, the weights are random, we obtain with something random. So we've done that once, we do it another time, random numbers, pass the information through the network, we have a new image. Okay, we do it many times, and we have generated a data set of fake images, fake samples. Then, first step of the algorithm, we have this neural network which will be trained to distinguish, to classify if its input comes from the original data set, real examples, or from the synthetic data set, fake example. So here again, we take one sample. Okay, we vectorize it, we pass it to the neural network, we pass the information down the layer, we obtain numbers, we pass it to the next layer, we obtain a final number between 0 and 1. 0, it means fake, okay, it says fake, which happens to be correct. Okay, here it can be totally by chance. We use the fact that it's correct to a bit tweak the weights by some backpropagation algorithm, but essentially you have to understand that this feedback information is taken into account so that the weights are updated, so the network change a bit. And then we pass another information, this time a real synthetic example, it passes through the network and it says fake, which this time is incorrect. We use that, no, it's wrong, update yourself, the network change a bit. We take a new example, once again from the original data set, it goes through the network, it says real, correct. Okay, at this stage, we think that the network is quite accurate at detecting between these two data sets. So we stop it there for the first part. Second part of the main loop, let's train the generator. So how do we do that? We sample random numbers, random vectors, we pass them through the generator, and we have a data set of only fake data, synthetic samples. Okay, now that we have that, we will pass them to the discriminator, which is supposed to be trained and should be able to distinguish. And here you see that it will not be perfect. So the first one, it was fooled. The generator make him believe it was real and actually it's fake. And the rest is fake, but for example, this one, it says fake, but not very confident. So it could be better. So it takes back this information into account. This network is frozen, untouched, but we use the error here to backpropagate the information and tweak the weights of the generator. So the generator change a bit so that next time he's asked, he will be better at fooling the discriminator. So that's essentially it. We have finished the first loop. Now, for example, if we ask samples from the generator, it will be a bit better. So for example, yet still not perfect, like this one doesn't look real, but it will be better at fooling the discriminator, etc. So we continue. So that's it. If you understood till this far, you have the basic idea of how a GAN works, and you could using modern framework like TensorFlow, PyTorch, code it yourself and it works. Now, just one thing to understand more on the technical side before going to the application is we talk about this this wire that goes into the box and that can bring like side information, this added signal. So for example, before we were able in the first paper to generate random digits, but what if you want to generate digits which are supposed to be in zero? So we want to sample random digits that are zero. So here you can see like lots of zeros, lots of ones, etc. So the question is how we do it. Actually, it's very simple, not much change to do. So here you have still your data set. So to make the transition to the next part of the talk, let's say it will be financial time series of S&P or like correlation matrices of stocks of the S&P. And the label will be, for example, risk on or risk off. Okay. And then what you do with these labels, it's encoded as a vector. You put it as an input to the generator, and you put it also as an input to the discriminator. So we learn to generate matrices that are realistic, but also associated to this label. And that's pretty much it. So you doing that, you will be able to generate, to learn a conditional distribution. And that was it for the tutorial on how this model works. Now let's go maybe to what the most interesting part, the applications. So essentially what we have learned to do is to generate synthetic data, right? And now we will think of ways to use it. So to give you a bit of context, strategy of overfitting, it's a plague for quants, and it can happen in many scenarios, but let's look at the simple one. So September 2020, so last month, a naive or unscrupulous strats presents his manager a new strategy, and he said that the strategy would have initiated a massive short in Feb 2020 and would have bet big in a rally starting late March 2020. So this strat sets the strategy to his manager as able to pick up early signal of market sell-off and bounce back thanks to advanced machine learning and alternative data. Obviously, what else, right? So the manager excited, well, either because it made lots of backtest money or because there is a machine learning alternative data, wants to deploy capital to it, of course. So what's the problem with that? So this problem is quite rampant in the industry. So one problem is because maybe these people are rewarded for showing a good backtest. So that's not a good way to incentivize a researcher. Or because there is not enough like sensitivity analysis, counterfactual thinking, etc. So we'll see a bit more concrete examples and that we will go through. So for example, a typical quant can be given a data set that looks like that. So it's a tabular data set of, for example, the second-hand car market in Hong Kong. So how did I get that? I scrap a website where there are cars that are put to the market and you know when they are sold. So you get lots of characteristics, the brand, the mileage, the age, the color, etc., the price. And you can do analysis, try to see if it correlates with the economy, etc. So essentially, there are two sort of breed of quants, type of quants. The econ quant, the one that will wants that his ideas are backed by some economic theory or justification. And sometimes he loves the justification so much that he will try to fit the data to make the data validate his theory. So this guy, for example, he can say, when the inventory builds up, so more people are selling the cars than buying, then it's a bad sign for the economy and the HSI will plummet over the next quarter. So here you see it's a bit hard to test because there is not so much data. That's through the inventory buildup, but it's maybe a bit laggy. And then there is lots of autocorrelation, so hard to say. Another idea from a math quant. So this guy has not much idea about the economy. He just has a black box machine learning algorithm that predicts that HSI is decreased whenever 2 Ferraris are sold right after a Bugatti Veyron comes to market, based on the given data set. So here it's also a weird idea, but if it works, why not? But still, we would like to gain a bit of confidence. So with the GANs, what we could do is use this data set of cars and resample similar data set, but not totally the same. So the idea is, and that's the first method to test the strategy stability. For example, we have this rule about the succession of cars that are sold. It's a strategy for betting. So what you can do is you take your original data set, okay? You make n copies of this data set, so they will have the same statistic characteristic, but a bit different. On each of these copies, you apply the strategy, and on each of these copies, you will have a different PNL. Hopefully not too different, but. And what will differentiate between a good strategy and a bad strategy is the stability. So, for example, if you have a decent turnover, so it makes lots of bets, and all the results are relatively the same, let's say sharp PNL, then you have confidence in this strategy and you say, okay, it's good. If, on the contrary, you obtain something like the red dot, so relatively low turnover with a PNL that varies a lot. So basically, you do just a few trades, and sometimes you get extremely lucky. You got high PNL. Sometimes you are unlucky and you have poor trades. When there is more turnover, you can have high sharp, like as likely as low sharp or low PNL. This is indicators that your strategy is poor and it was just overfitted to a few data points. So you find a good configuration that in the past happened to work. Very likely it won't work in the future. So in summary, using GANs, you can copy your data set, apply the same strategy to all the data set, looks at how it performs. If it's stable, it gets the same performance metrics, then you are more confident into it. So still no proof guarantee, but you are more confident to it. So that's for the first method. Another method, still based on the same idea, is you can take your original data set. You are a manager of a team of quants, okay? You have n quants. You take your data set, you copy it, you keep the original data for yourself. You make your n quants work on it independently, and they will come up with strategies, right? They will do their best to find one, and they will probably find one. So the idea here is then you look at what they found, and did they all find the same strategy or not? If they did, or something similar, then given the data, you are quite confident that this strategy is quite salient, quite easy to find. So that's good or not. It's good because you are quite confident it's not a fluke finding, it's quite salient. But then it's likely also to be crowded, everyone will find it also. So it's really given the data. If you have like a very expensive data set, or you built in such a way that no one will have access easily to it, then that's the perfect world. Still, you want to test on the original data before running into production to see if they didn't learn a fluke or an artifact of the GAN. That can happen also. But at least given the data, you are quite confident that that is a valid strategy. So that's also something you can do using these models. Another method based on this idea. So once again, it's something that could have been done before, that was probably done using all statistical techniques like bootstrap or block bootstrapping. So just to remind people that are not familiar with what is bootstrap, is like, let's say you have a time series of the S&P. What you will do, you will chunk into pieces, and you will rebuild a synthetic time series with these pieces. So you have another alternative synthetic data that is okay, realistic, but if you were to do that and then fit your strategy, for example, fine-tune your strategy on all these replicas obtained with these old statistical techniques, some paper from Koshiyama, Feruzzi, and al. Find that you will underperform in comparison to if you were to do that using synthetic, realistic financial time series generated from the GAN. So here, the idea is the same. You will do like many replicas, and instead of fitting your best window for the momentum on one, you will find a window that works on the many copies, but just that using a more realistic copies will help you to find a better parameter. So that's the main idea. That's something that was done with all techniques. With these new techniques, it seems to be better. And another idea that you have these n copies of the original data, so noisy copies produced by the GAN. You can fit one model on each of these, and then you can use all the models for the prediction. So that's something that is called, for example, in machine learning, bagging, like the typical random forest algorithm example. But here it's a bit the same. You will bag all the models together to have more robust predictions. So that's it. So that was one big use case. One other use case, which is more like for portfolio construction and management, it's to generate lots of time series that verifies the correlation structure. So that's more like related to my research. So the idea is that you want to allocate capital to your strategies. It can be the typical risk premias or more funky strategies. And you want to do that systematically. So how do you do that? You know, literature have many techniques like Markowitz, mean variance plus, risk parity, hierarchical risk parity. Each one, if you read the paper, they are the best in the world, but in the end, it's not so sure. And if you do the numerical experiment yourself, it depends on if it's stable across periods, universe, etc. So nothing to be concluded. So how do we conclude something? And if anything is useful, so what we can do is realistic simulations. So what is that? So basically in my work, what I wanted to do, and actually I got the motivation by working in the network, correlation network field, is how to gain confidence in the robustness of a method. So with these GANs, you can see, for example, the correlation matrix as a picture, but not quite, because unlike a picture, it has like strong a known mathematical definition, like the matrix must be PSD and things like that. You will train the GAN to generate realistic correlation matrices. So how do we know if they are realistic? So for people working computer vision, it's very easy. They look at the face picture and say, oh yeah, of course it works. For correlation matrices, a bit harder. But still, these objects have been studied by Bouchot from CFM and others for more than 20 years. So we know lots of features of them. Like, for example, the distribution of their eigenvalues follow a Marchenko-Pastur law with one big eigenvalue, which is the market, smaller eigenvalues, which are the clusters, the industries, that it has a nice hierarchical clustering structure, that coefficients are positive, the eigenvector, the entries of the first eigenvectors are positive, etc. So basically, I did this model, and I think it's the first model in the literature, GANs or other model included, that is able to reproduce all these stylized facts. And yes, so that's it. So essentially, using this model, what we will do is sample correlated time series, okay? Generate time series verifying the correlation structure. So here you can plug the correlation matrix in a multivariate Gaussian or multivariate student. You won't verify the time series stylized facts, but you have the cross-sectional stylized facts. Then what you can do is you take all the risk-based portfolio allocation method you want to horse race, Markowitz or whatnot, mean variance. For example, here we will test the example of a naive inverse variance or naive risk parity versus the Marcos Lopez de Prado hierarchical risk parity. So you sample time series, let's say 1 year, 252 observation. You fit to this time series, you compute the weights, and then out of samples or another data sample from the correlation, you will look at the performance out of sample, okay? Then you will analyze this performance. So for example, you can define a target variable, which is risk out of sample of inverse variance minus risk of out of sample of risk parity. If that is positive, that means the risk of this method is bigger than this one. That means that this one is outperforming, right? Okay. So once you are at this stage, what you can do is, and that's an analysis pipeline, you take your GAN, you generate lots of correlations, you extract features of these correlation matrices, you pass them into some machine learning model. Then on the risk or the target variable, so the difference of the risk out of sample, you fit the model, and then you try to, if the fit is good, otherwise just stop working, there is nothing to do. If you are good at predicting which method will outperform another one, then you try to understand in which cases one method outperforms the other one. So for example, if we compare the Marcos Lopez de Prado hierarchical risk parity versus the naive risk parity, we can see that we can easily predict based on the feature the outperformance. So this is in sample correlation of 60%, out of sample correlation of 40% between prediction and the actual value. So we can be quite good at predicting. And what is interesting, we can also try to understand when Marcos method beats the naive risk parity. And for example, so maybe you are a bit late, so we'll do it quick. If we look at this feature, what it says that the value of the variable is big when this feature is big. So it means that HRP beats naive risk parity when the cophynetic correlation is high. And what actually is this feature? This feature is just characterize how the correlation matrix is hierarchical. So here, okay, it's quite intuitive. The hierarchical risk parity beats the risk parity when the hierarchy is very present in your data. If it's not, it doesn't beat it. And other feature tells the same story, but you can see, for example, with this one, that in case of crisis, there is not so much hierarchy. It's like a sell-off. Everything is correlated. And in this case, the HRP is not that much better than naive risk parity. So you can have this sort of insights for many problems using this pipeline. And that was essentially the story I wanted to tell. Now, let's conclude on the limitations. So I gave lots of some ideas on how they can be used, but you have to be aware that these GANs, it's work in progress. It's not at the technology stage yet. So fitting this model is quite hard, it takes time. Even if you do it well, if you train a model on original data, so not even in finance, an original data, and you train in a model on the GAN generated data, there will be still a gap in performance that is closing with years and effort passing, but still it's not on par. So there are still artifacts, etc. An interesting research problem. Researchers other than me have found ways to generate realistic financial time series, so univariate. Let's say S&P 500 returns, where there is volatility clustering, there is all the stylized facts, asymmetric gain loss, etc. I have found a way to capture the correlation structure and generate like infinity or condition to the stress of the market, such correlation. But to the best of my knowledge, there is no method that can at the same time capture the cross-sectional stylized facts, the correlation structure, and also the time series stylized facts. So that's interesting research problem, but I'm pretty sure that if enough people will focus on it, it will be solved within the next couple of years. And that was it essentially for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the fascinating presentation, Gautier. This was very enlightening. I think there are a couple of questions in here, so we'll probably start with those questions, and then I have a couple of questions of my own. The first question, I think, There are some very specific questions. And on slide 20, what's the significance of the random number generator? And I think yes, we can probably start.
Sorry, Sri, your voice is a bit fainted. Can you speak louder? Or?
Yeah, so I think there were a couple of questions. One is, what's the significance of the random number generator? And I think it was specific to slide number 20.
Yes, so about the random number generator. So typical choice in the literature are uniform or Gaussian. For the GAN, it's a very much empirical question, but I don't think it makes much difference. What is interesting is that after fitting the original space, the space of random numbers, if interesting properties, they can be they capture some structure. So for example, if you displace the vector in some direction, you may actually vary your image or your samples alongside one feature. So for faces, you can change the color of the hair or the length of the hair, etc. So this is so it's called disentangling the latent space. There are special techniques for that. But yeah, usually it doesn't depend much. It can be done on Gaussian variables, and after you traverse -3 to 3 if it's a standardized normal, and you have pretty much all the values, and that's it.
Okay.
That's for other methods like adversarial autoencoder. This space has much more importance, or variational autoencoders, but for GANs, I don't think so.
Okay, great.
I'm not sure.
I think there were also a couple of questions specific to some of the slides. I think on slide 47, about the copies made, what data augmentation technique was used, and what strategies applied to the data set for n copies.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
So let me start with on slide 47. How are the copies made? Which data augmentation technique was used? Is the question.
So in slide 47, let me go back. Yeah. So here, so here you can use many. So if you were to do it like the pre-GAN epoch, pre-GAN era, you could like use Bootstrap. So you sample in the rows, which are cars, and you have like you have something that is looking similar, that respect. With GANs, what you can use is like you learn row by row, and what it will learn the correlation in between the columns, and then when you generate a new row, it will generate a row which has realistic correlation between the columns. If you want to generate also the temporal structure, you will have to generate blocks. So you take a block of rows and you ask to generate a block of 5 rows, so it will learn the correlation between columns and between rows. If you think there is a bit of here in this specific data set, there is none, because it's like a daily refresh of many cars. But yes, so you could use Bootstrap techniques, old school method of doing it, or apply a tabular GAN on that. So there is the link of a paper that does that outside Finance, but that presents the technique to apply it on tabular data. And you can either do it on the data set, or if you think that you have to associate the label you want to predict, so a future return or future realized return, you add one column with this Y variable that you want to predict, and here you sample jointly the X and the Y.
Awesome, awesome. I think there are a couple of questions. I don't know if it was contextual. Can you define crowded in this context? And I think there's also another follow-up question. Can you explain what's the magnitude of the eigenvalue qualitatively?
Okay. So crowding here, I have not so much insight, but you can understand that if you are doing like a basic momentum or a basic risk premium that is defined in a Fama French paper, any people can do that. So the problem is that everybody is trading the same stock at the same time, so there is market impact. Even if you are small, those are big, so you don't capture what you are supposed to capture. So that's for the crowding part, but I'm not a crowding expert. The other question was on the magnitude of the eigenvalues. Okay, well, so basically the eigenvalues, so you can see it in the PCA, it explains the percentage of variance. So for example, if you have one very large eigenvalues and the larger the more, yeah, one very large, what it means, it's usually associated to a market. So basically it says that one factor, the first eigenvector, is explaining lots of variance. So in the typical S&P case, it means that you explain, typically it's like 40%, so you explain with one vector 40% of the variation of the stocks. And for example, if it's stressed, this eigenvalue will be bigger. And what is interesting also is to look at the first eigenvector. So you look at the entries, the distribution of the entries. If they are all on the same value, it means that all the stocks are contributing the same to the market portfolio, let's say, the first eigenvector portfolio. So, and if there is some dispersion in the eigenvalue entries, that means that there are stocks that contribute more than others, and this is more like it's a feature of, for example, hierarchy in the global correlation. So for example, if it's a normal market or rally, there will be like cluster by industries, and this will be translated in high dispersion by high dispersion in the first eigenvector entries, and the first eigenvalue will be maybe lower, and a couple of other big eigenvalue will be higher. So that is like a typical. I guess if you read paper from Avaladena and all this data thing, eigenvector portfolios, you will have this interpretation, or you can look at Bouchot. So he has 20 years of literature on these questions, how to interpret eigenvalues, eigenvectors, and how to distinguish the one that carries information and the one that represents pure noise.
Okay, cool. So I think a follow-up question was, what's the core novelty in the Corban paper? And I was also kind of looking at, there are some literature about, using correlations in traditional techniques. Other than using GANs, how do you kind of look at, this work compared to similar, work which is out there, both in the GAN space and also in the traditional modeling space?
Okay, so if I understood the question, so to generate these correlation matrices, so I'm aware of a couple of other works. So first, there are algorithms dating back from the 70s, I think, that allow one to sample uniformly correlation matrices in the space of valid correlation matrices, the elliptop. But then they have no structure at all. The correlation is centered on zero. It's relatively Gaussianly distributed around zero, whereas the stocks correlation, for example, are positive, tilted to the whole distribution is positive because there is no free lunch diversification, for example. So basically, this method typically don't capture any stylized facts that we know of these empirical matrices. And then there are more mathematical approach that, as far as I'm aware, manage to capture one or two, typically the Perron-Frobenius properties, but for example, the power law of the degrees of the network associated to the correlation matrix. This one is quite complex and algorithmic in nature, and no other work is able to, still is able, no other approach is able to capture this complex property.
Okay.
So that's same also for the time series literature. People have developed like Black-Scholes, the Easton model to capture more and more stylized facts like the volatility clustering, but each time they target one or they try to add one, and it takes 20 years and it's super hard. What is nice with this model is that even not a stochastic processus expert can beat them with this model to some extent without doing much math. So that's the impressive part.
And what kinds of data sets or asset classes have you tried this model on? And are there certain asset classes which work better with this model compared to other asset classes?
Yeah, so this question, so basically, of course, all the literature is done on stocks and S&P 500. Why? Because it's easily available for a researcher or people that, or when you want to communicate. Of course, I can't publish or I want to talk about like very sensitive, very proprietary credit default swap and very expensive credit default swap data. So yeah, the test bed, the benchmark is like, of course, S&P 500 stocks. It depends. I think we can do interesting things in other asset classes, and it has other properties. If it's OTC, then you have asynchronous sampling and things like that. That's where they could also shine. But it's just that it's too cumbersome to communicate or publish anything in this thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And also, what kind of frequency of data have you tried with?
So my work and the other work, it's daily data stocks, essentially.
Okay. Cool. I think there are a couple of other questions on the panel. One of them is it possible to get a GAN-generated copy of the original data? For instance, it's talk about overfitting. Maybe, for instance, imagine using price data Y tweets data to create a model. Would the GAN be able to generate a data set that correlate well or reliable price and sentiment data in order to train a model along with it?
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's associated with overfitting, but yeah, you could probably talk about it.
And I think it's associated with even worse problems. So here, if we talk about S&P price data, okay, then there is the problem of overfitting. If we overfit the GAN and it just memorize the data set, that can happen. And definitely it's not great. And it may actually be more a bootstrap, what we are doing, because it's kind of memorized. So in some extent, if it fails, it's becoming more a bootstrap method. But I didn't talk today about all the other applications. But for example, if you were to use these techniques in like retail banking to share models or share data to the research, because you think they are anonymized, you have to be very careful, because these neural networks, if you don't enforce lots of things like clippings, so they can memorize exactly points. So for example, you have credit card data or other sensitive information. You fit a GAN, you think you are safe, you share it, and probably it's possible, it's not impossible, that it spits the exact same point. So then there are researchers that studies this thing in the field of differential privacy, where they are trying to quantify how likely it is or not, and what are the good practice and the methods to ensure mathematically it won't happen. So that's something to be aware. It's a total different, it's a big field of research also.
Absolutely. And a couple of other questions, are the models accounting for exogenous events?
Yes or no. You could potentially inject this information in the conditional version of the GAN. So for example, but then you still need some past information to, so if it's exogenous information that used to happen statistically enough times, then you have this side information, you put it, and you will have sample condition on these exogenous events. If it's very rare events or something that you think as a fundamental manager, but it didn't happen statistically with these techniques, you can't do much, and you would be better suited, I think, using Bayesian networks or like probabilistic graphical models, which would be more useful for this task.
Have you looked at any models which are good with change detection or breakpoint detection kinds of applications?
No, but in this framework, I will model it with with the condition. So for example, you have some other model that are for the breakpoint detection, and this gives a categorical variable or continuous. And then you said, okay, but now I think that over the next couple of months, the market will be in a rally mode. Then to try if my strategy is working in a rally mode, so it's not for all weather strategies. So to try if it works in this type of market, then I will sample time series condition on that and see how it fares.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm not sure because you don't. So you can control a bit this model for the conditioning, but otherwise, no, it's not. Can learn some dynamics, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, okay, cool. So what next after CoreGANs? Are you working on extensions to it or tackling the multivariate problem?
Yeah, so how many? So currently I'm supervising like a dozen of students in the French engineering school.
Okay.
So they are redoing this thing to show how it's easy to do it, etc. But then there are so many extensions I want to do. So extending to a conditional version where you can condition, for example, by an expected mean return of the S&P to have the associated correlation. I want to extend also to covariance. It's not so much information to do it, but then you have to be careful in the design. Do you try to learn it jointly, or you learn the correlation and the vector of variance?
Mhm.
That has can big numerical impacts. And then on the time series aspects, I'm interested in doing it on out of sample behavior of pair trades. So you have pair trades. Usually you can always find a nice mean reverting process for optimization. Most of the time, if it's purely statistically based, they will break out of sample. So basically, you want a bit to characterize the distribution of the breaks. So you want to have a large data set of how they behave out of sample, learn a distribution, and then on your portfolio, you learn both the correlation between these pairs, the correlation of the breaks, and how bad they can break to do a bit of portfolio management on the pairs. So that's something on my to-do
Are they
list.
all dependent or relying on GANs or I mean, these are generic problems, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is
So
one of the way of accomplishing it.
So usually how I process is I always start very simple to make sure I have a good grasp of the problem. So bootstrap, block bootstrap, that's the way I start. Then I try to characterize, and that's also a question in the chat, the distribution on the data by some stylized facts, so some salient properties. And then what I try to do is after I with the GANs, can I recover something similar to what I had with Bootstrap? Or can I recover the properties? And then also to answer some question on the chat, because, okay, computer vision is visual, here it's not. So you can try to recover salient properties. That's one inclusion if you want distribution equality. Then the other one, it's harder, but what you can do is like extract features, do a PCA of the empirical distribution, PCA of the generated distribution, and you look if the distribution match. Of course, you have lots of information loss because you first project to a feature space, so already a loss, and then a PCA or TSNE or whatnot. But still, you can have a grasp if you have a mode collapse. You capture just a small part of the distribution, or if you capture a broader part. So that's the way I do to check if the result of these models are okay or not.
Right. And do you use any metrics? I think there's a specific question about memorization and GANs. Do you have any metrics, not just to look for, the statistical quality of the outputs, but how different it is from the ones you have used for training to make sure that you're not replicating the same results?
No, so personally, that's something I didn't try at all.
Mhm.
I didn't have this profile, but that's a good question and a good concern to have. I'm sure that they are, because in the end, what you want is distance between dataset or multivariate distribution. So there is literature on that. The higher the dimension, the harder always. So yes, you can do with projection or things like that.
Mhm.
That's not something I so far looked too much into it, but yeah, definitely that's an important point.
Absolutely. Cool. And then there are a couple of other questions. I think we've had a lot of questions, but I'm so glad that we were able to extend this session and make time for these questions. I think another question is autocorrelation is a common issue. How do these methods in general handle autocorrelation? I
Mm,
mean, in some ways, we are factoring in autocorrelation.
yeah, so I'm not so sure how to answer because if there is autocorrelation in the data, so normally the GAN, if trained well and if it does what is asked for, should reproduce this autocorrelation. So for example, this volatility clustering direct facts in time series
Mhm.
of stocks returns, it's typically autocorrelation of the variance of the second moment. And it's present in the data and the GANs are able to reproduce it. There is no autocorrelation of the returns per se, the raw returns, and the GAN doesn't produce any. So basically, what I noticed is at least the first moments and the basic statistics are quite easily well preserved by GANs.
Mhm.
Then if you go into funky nonlinear and tail events, then they are not good at capturing the tails. They regularize. You can show mathematically in this case that if you use such network with such type of nonlinearities, they typically you will end up with a Lipschitz function, which means that all moments are defined, which means that you can't have outliers or tails. So by construction, you will not be able to generate them. So yes, but the first moments usually it's not a problem for GANs. Tails can, yeah, you may have to do some tricks or some custom architecture to capture them.
Cool, cool. I think there's one last question. Typically from an experimental setup, you say, okay, well, original data is not working well, so maybe, if I use GANs, but I mean, like, I think the mention here was like, original data perform better than models trained on GAN generated data. But if you're augmenting original data with the GAN generated data, will it be better than models which were generated using just the original data sets? And if so, what kinds of problems? And I can think about like, rare class problems or imbalance class problems, if you will. If you just, I mean, I've tried some experiments wherein if you segment out like the rare classes and just build a GAN with just the rare class and then try and augment it with original data, the models are a little more generalized because you see abundance of the sampled rare class problems. But I don't know if you, in our experience, you've seen something similar or other kinds of issues.
Yeah. So definitely, so that's typically like regularization by the data, more data to regularize your model, lower its variance. So so I didn't do that personally much because I didn't work too much with imbalance classes. But for example, people that are doing fraud detections, they are typically and unfortunately confronted with this problem, much less fraudsters than nice normal people. So there are a couple of papers that say that they use these techniques to extend to enrich the fraudster class, put a bit more diversity, more points, and then after the downstream task, so not necessarily GANs, a typical classifier, not necessarily end-to-end, but the downstream task is enhanced. They have better result at classification because they have enriched beforehand the data with a GAN.
Interesting, very interesting. And how do you see use cases? I know you mentioned a couple of use cases on trading. Have you seen any use cases in terms of stress testing or scenario generation, especially with COVID? Some of the neural networks broke because they were generally trained with data which was collected in calm periods and volatile periods. So I don't know if you have looked at like, models which broke the time series into stressful periods and how will the model perform, and in the backtests based on calm periods and how did the model perform, kind of a thing.
Yeah, so that's so yes and no, the answer. um, you could do that, and that's one thing I want to look at. You could do that with conditional generation. Well, it's a bit reactive. You say, okay, now that it's stress or it's starting to be stress, let's put ourselves in stress condition. Let's look at how the strategy, the risk, everything is behaving on this stress behavior. So that's one way you can handle a stress test, etc. It's to condition on a stress scenario and use past stress data for current stress data. But once again, these GANs, they are very, very statistical. And if it was not in the trained data, of course, they will produce new data, but same statistics. So you won't be able to do that. So for your use case on COVID, I'm not so much bullish on using GANs, but more like these Bayesian networks and extensions that, for example, I think you have Alexander Denef in your
Yep.
in your school, and I think he's quite an expert on these models. And to me, they make much more sense to model like unseen extreme events that you can encode into a distribution, marginal, conditional distribution, and you don't need the data. You don't need data that at all. It's just like if that happens or that being happened, it can be that bad. So they rely partly on expert and human judgment and partly on the mechanics of probabilities. And I would be more like, I think this would be more useful to help in situations that are totally unseen. Because GAN in the end is like bootstrapping plus plus. It's like using data in the past to generate similar scenarios in the future, but it's totally unseen, then nothing you can do about it, right?
Interesting. And how much of synthetic data generation has actually made it to practice? I mean, I hear a lot about it, at least in, well, if I look at it from a general neural networks, scientific community perspective, manufacturing, healthcare, and some of these other areas have taken on using synthetic data generation much more much more willingly compared to that of finance. I mean, in finance, you traditionally have the simulation methods, but how much of GANs and synthetic data generation have been adopted in the financial services world, or you still think it's more of a research problem which quants are fascinated about, but use cases aren't there yet?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know because this industry is quite secretive by definition. I noticed that a couple of years ago at ICML, some hedge fund sponsors were trying to speak to people that had GAN expertise.
Mm-hmm.
So after what they do with that, I don't know. I'm not sure that it's as used. So JP is quite vocal in their use of GAN, so they have a team that also explore application within their different retail and market banking. I'm not sure it's very developed so far, but maybe in the most sophisticated place or not. But what I'm sure it's quite laggy with respect to, as you said, healthcare, where they use these technologies heavily already to anonymize and share data that are quite sensitive to researchers, to research labs, to help make the progress without compromising people. So I think data vendors and the retail banking industry should get some help or inspiration from this healthcare industry. But as far as I'm aware, I don't know, it's not very developed. So much still at the research stage.
Oh, awesome! I think this was great. There was, I think, well, we can probably have like, I think, one last question. Using RNNs instead of generators in GANs. Do you have a specific opinion on it?
So I didn't get using RBM or using RNN.
It was, I think it says RNNs.
RNN, okay. So recurrent networks, yes, it has been done.
Yep. In fact, have a demo.
The thing is that already RNN or LSTM alone, it's quite hard to train. Or it's a bit harder.
And they're very fragile too.
Yeah. So when you put it in a GAN, it can quickly become a nightmare. Because GAN has also lots of technical difficulties and instabilities. So combining both, it's quite hard. but it has been done in a few papers. In the financial papers, it's mostly the vanilla multi-layer perceptron architecture that is used. And after, I see also in the chat a few questions about RBMs and the market generator by Christian Schwarz.
Yeah.
Yes, that's another approach. I'm not sure that is differentially private, by the way, but yes, that's another approach. After, what they do is yeah, it's a competitive approach. After, it's a paper. They have this approach. There are other paper, different approach, but so far the field is such that it's not mature enough, that there is no common data set, common benchmark, test beds, etc. So people are throwing ideas. They are testing. It works somewhat, but there is no strong validation. There is no reproduction of the results so far. So there is no 10 team of researchers that have gone through the thing, replicate results. So it's hard to say anything. Like, I presented today GANs, but I could have talked about adversarial autoencoders. There are interesting ideas, maybe competitive, but so far it's too early to say if there is for finance one that is better than the other. But for computer vision, for example, it's clear that this deep architecture like GANs outperform RBMs or other simple autoencoders, right?
Absolutely. And that leads to my final question. I think we have a couple minutes, which is, you brought up validation. In physical problems and computer vision problems, validation is much more easier because you have ground truth. In financial services, what should you be thinking about validation, comparing different generators, if you will, or even looking at metrics for saying that this generator was better than this other generator, because you will have one realized scenario in the future. And you'll be generating so many more, and you could potentially get one or two, or by fluke, a couple of scenarios right. But what does it actually mean in terms of validating without having that futuristic perspective, but you're only having the the truth of the past?
Yes. I think in the literature, and even for the other domain, it's a totally unsolved questions and quite hard. So in our specific context, I talked about like stylized facts or realistic features. So there are two ways to show how realistic you are. So each stylized fact, you could like do a error, loss metric, error metric. Then you end up with n metrics of errors. Then you have another way to quantify how much you reproduce of the whole distribution, or if you are just a part. So it's another score error metric. And then the big problem is like, how do you merge this n different and not same scale scores? So that's a very hard problem to fuse this information to have one final score to say this one is better than the other. That would be very helpful. There is no commonly accepted way of benchmarking. So far, yeah, it's lacking. It's something that would be very useful, but it's also something that's very hard to define.
Absolutely, absolutely. With that, I think we are very close to 1 o'clock. So thank you so much again, Gautier, and I really appreciate you taking your midnight to make time for us, and that's very much appreciated. I would like to, conclude with a couple of quick announcements regarding next week and the next upcoming weeks. We are going to be having many sessions on various themes, including fintech, which is going to be the focus of topic next week. And after that, we are also going to have a couple of sessions on another session on synthetic data generation by Stephen Jansen. And then Dan Lebueu is going to be talking about some explainability and other machine learning concepts. And all the slides and videos will be available on Q.Academy. And the time has still not passed. We are offering multiple courses in the context of machine learning, model risk management, and also data science and in the fall school. So please check out QFall which was this particular site. Give me 1 second, just get there for a second. So if you go to qfallschool.splashthat.com, you should be able to see all the programs we have for you in the fall. So till next time, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week, and I will see you in another week. Thank you so much again, Gautier, and I wish you a very good night. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.